So, with all this criticism I've been making of how governments in the Western world are handling the pandemic, I think a good question to ask would be how would I handle it? What kinds of policies would I support? Well, to be honest, the strategy I would advocate would be basically a combination of enforcing mask laws and protecting especially vulnerable groups without shutting down all of society as a whole. So that would mean, for instance, I would favor, totally open tourism. I would favor not forcibly closing any businesses at all or forcing them to have only a small number of people inside. Everything would basically be open for business. However, I would definitely support laws mandating that people do have to wear masks in indoor public places. Now, the only exception to that would be restaurants and bars where the tables would have to be spaced out somewhat, but obviously you can't eat or drink with a mask on, so that would be the exception. And I guess like filming movies and TV shows. But other than that, yeah, I would actually support the continuation of mask laws because I do think it actually works significantly to stem the flow of the virus. And I think it's not as much of an imposition on our freedom as other policies that have been enacted. That's what I don't understand about a lot of people. A lot of people seem to actually hate the masks more than the other restrictions. And it's like, are you crazy? Like, wearing a mask is a pretty small price to pay compared to like not being able to go to the next province or having every independent business closed. Like, it's like, really, the mask bothers you that much? Like, all the other shit isn't that big a deal, but it's the mask that bothers you. That's one thing I never understood about a lot of people, but whatever, I digress. Now, realistically, even though I would support opening everything, that doesn't mean that the government should force things to be open. Like, say, for instance, some businesses may voluntarily choose to close indoor dining rooms in some restaurants. And for instance, I know like a lot of churches have voluntarily closed to tourism because even in summer 2020, when the regulations were relaxed somewhat on the government level, the Catholic churches still were not allowing tourists inside. Like, I actually snuck into one. Pretending to be going there for mass because I wanted to look at the interior of the church. But yeah, I mean, basically, the government can't force them to be open, but at the same time, I think the government should encourage them to, because I think we don't fully realize what we're doing here by destroying the tourism industry to this extent. Like, I think a lot of lives are going to be ruined by this in a very, very long-term fashion. So yeah, those are pretty much the policies I would support. And also, I think certain vulnerable places do need to be somewhat locked down, like in particular seniors homes, because I believe seniors homes are something like 40 to 50% of all COVID deaths. So that's a very small percentage of the population with a very large percentage of deaths. In terms of seniors homes, I'd favor like pretty much almost a total quarantine of these homes, meaning that even the staff, I think, should be quarantined. I think they should be paid extra. The government should chip in and subsidize, I guess you'd call it like wartime measures or whatever. Like, I forget what the term is for it, but it's like during disaster pay would maybe be a term for it. Like, basically, they would have to undergo really harsh measures. Like, they'd have to be basically totally quarantined from the rest of civilization. But the upside is they would make a shit ton of money. And obviously they're free to leave, they're free to quit their jobs. And I also think if some of the nursing home residents don't want to live in these prison-like conditions and they have family who are willing to take them in, they should be given that option too. But again, if you choose that option, you can't really like come back. So there should always be an element of choice to it, but I do feel that, like, yes, in the case of seniors' homes, they should be locked down very strictly. Like, I would not allow any visitors in person. The only exception is, like, actually when we visited my grandma during the summer, they let us visit her outdoors, but it was like at a very large distance. That's maybe the only circumstance where I would allow visitations. It was like at a distance, and we had to wear a mask even though we were outdoors. My grandma did not have to wear a mask, but we did. But other than that, I wouldn't allow any visitations. I would keep the nursing homes very, very locked down. But again, like this is because like the idea is it's a bit of a trade-off. You concentrate on the places that are the most vulnerable rather than locking down all of society as a whole. And like to be honest, I do think this virus is legitimately dangerous for senior citizens. Like, the death rate among young people is quite low, but the death rate among old people is pretty high. And maybe, you could argue that it is no more dangerous than the flu simply because these people don't die from the flu as much simply because we give them flu shots. And it's like that could be the case that, like, if the vaccine was widely available to these vulnerable populations, COVID would be no more dangerous than the flu. That is entirely possible. However, right now, we've completely bungled the process of distributing the vaccine, especially in Canada. The US is doing a bit better, but actually a lot better, let's be honest. Canada has fucked this one up royally. Because we feel like we have to get all the vaccines to like Inuit people in Nunavut first before anyone else for some fucking reason. But anyway, yeah, I mean, my point is, I do think old people are in danger. And I think there is legitimate cause for locking down retirement residences and probably put some other, added protocols in place in certain other institutions like schools and prisons, for instance, or military barracks. But no, I would not suggest like closing these places entirely with the exception of like closing them to visitors or in the case of schools, closing them entirely. I would not suggest that. I would only suggest for seniors' homes, keeping them very strictly locked down. And I think also if we need more people to work at the seniors' homes, the government should be subsidizing expedited training of people to become PSWs or other types of employees at seniors' homes. And I think this should be subsidized as well. Like, again, a lot of these solutions I'm suggesting do cost a lot of money, but they cost, in my opinion, much less money than destroying the entire economy for who even knows how many years. Plus, like, as I said, I'm not a libertarian. I'm totally fine if we have to like raise taxes a bit, especially on the upper class and the upper middle class. If that's what we have to do, then so be it, You see, I'm okay with some restrictions. I just don't think we should be locking down all of society. I don't think we should be destroying every small business. I don't think we should be completely destroying the tourism industry, especially since there have been studies in Canada showing that only like something between 1.4 and 1.8% of COVID cases are actually directly linked to travel. And that includes both domestic and international. So it's a very small portion of COVID cases are linked to travel, but travel has been disproportionately demonized. I think part of the reason is, yes, travel was linked to how the virus spread in the early stages, but now that the virus exists in every country in the world, the main cause by far is community transmission, which means the virus spreading from one person to the other within the same community, or at least the same like neighboring communities, rather than tourism or travel. Like at this point, now that the virus is already everywhere, tourism and travel isn't actually responsible for that much of the spread of it. And it's being disproportionately demonized. And frankly, I don't see how the tourism industry is ever going to recover. Like hotels are going to close en masse. Some of these tourist attractions may even have to close. Hostels, forget about it. They're fucked. Even the airlines might be fucked. I mean, the government will probably try to bail them out. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But my point is, yeah, all this shit, like, this is what I would do. Basically, as I said, a combination of masks, enforcing mask wearing, and locking down specifically vulnerable institutions with vulnerable populations. I would do those two things rather than destroying the whole economy and destroying basically everybody's way of life.